All right, everybody, welcome back to Deep Naked Thoughts. Today with me, I have a very special guest. I have Sensei Oscar, and I met Sensei Oscar when I was a teenager. I was actually training with his daughter. I would train Taekwondo, and she would train Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. So two very different martial arts. But I would see them across the mat training. Oftentimes, they would invite me to train, and at the time, I was just a little too scared of being flipped or being tapped out or being choked. But ever since then, I've actually now I think I'm more mature and definitely a lot more ready to, go into a different martial art. But the connection is still very strong. I still look up to Sensei Oscar, and he's here with me today. So, Sensei, how would you like to introduce yourself? What do you remember? How did we meet? And what can you tell us about yourself?
Oh, of course, I remember meeting you through my daughter Christina. Like you said, y'all were training,
Hmm.
separate classes, the same dojo. But
Hmm.
yeah, definitely. At that time, I was training my daughter towards her black belt, and she was excelling in judo and jujitsu. But as far as I go, judo jiu-jitsu practitioner. I've been for a long time, practiced various martial arts and just been involved in it for a very long time.
So, how do we get your origin story? When did you start training? How did you start training? Was it in high school, college, earlier than that? Why did you keep training? I mean, a lot of people stop at a black belt and then call it a day, but I mean, this has pursued through your adult lifetime into teaching children, teenagers, other people. And so, how do we get that? How do we get you, basically?
You know, I started training as a teenager kind of by accident. I was band nerd in high school, and I was really into music and into the marching band at Gadsden High School. At the time, Gadsden actually was the only high school in the valley, so we had a very large number of students there. So our marching band, it was almost 300 plus. It was a huge band, but we were practicing, or we were scheduled to practice one day, and we would practice on the football field. And there was a lightning storm coming in. So the band director, the principal decided, we can't have the kids out in an open field. So they canceled practice, being that Gadsden is, in Anthony, and we lived in Mesquite. It's one of those things that I couldn't go home, so you have to wait for the after school buses and things. So basically, we were just sitting around with nothing to do, trying to stay out of the rain. And a good friend of mine said, "Hey, there's this like a self defense or like karate class in the lobby of the school. Do you want to go? Do you want to go do that?" And I remember telling him, "No, absolutely not. Like that doesn't even sound like something I want to do." And he said, "Come on, let's go." And I was like, "No, that doesn't sound like and like anything." And he said, and of course, me being 14 at the time, he said, the class is mostly girls. And so, me being a young
Oh,
man at the time, we went out there, and yeah, there was about, I would say, 15 to 20 girls and like two or three boys out there. And when he said, there's a karate class, when we showed up, they were on the ground wrestling. And I looked at my friend, and I was confused, and I was like, this does not look like what we would see on TV at the time. At the time, karate and kickboxing was really popular in the movies, and that's not what they were doing. So I thought, my friend's crazy. These guys are just wrestling around on the ground, in their pajamas, and it doesn't that doesn't resonate with me. So I didn't have anything to do, so I was sitting around in the lobby just watching them kind of wrestle around. And the class took a little bit of a water break, and a young lady kind of came up to me and said, "Hi, what's your name?" And of course, I was kind of shy, and I went to shake her hand, and when I stood up and shook her hand, she flipped me over her shoulder onto the mat. And my friend that took me to the class told her to do that, and I was embarrassed, of course, but me being the very curious individual that I am, because she flipped me and pinned me down, and I couldn't get away from her, which it bothered me and embarrassed me at
mhm,
the time. But at the same time, it's like, okay, here's this little tiny girl. She picked me up in the air and pinned me down. So I needed to know
mhm.
how that happened, and that's pretty much when I started training. We had a active club at Gadsden High School at the time. From there, that's how it started, and just it piqued my curiosity, and and just kept with it.
Okay, so you're taking us through high school, who you were in band. I didn't know that, how you got started. I did not expect that kind of origin story. I didn't think it was because of a girl flipping you over her shoulder, which is I didn't expect that. Also, just the trends of martial arts. I feel like wrestling has had its moment. I think we're very highly of wrestlers and wrestling. But then I think it kind of slowed down in popularity, and then it kind of like you said, kickboxing, and then maybe because of UFC and maybe Ronda Rousey or other fighters, I saw a huge increase in popularity in judo and jujitsu. So, yeah, I think it's just a whole different kind of sport. So, when did you formally join a dojo or have a sensei or some form of like, I don't know, just instructor? Like, what can you tell us about that and what you learned from them?
When I formally started training in high school, the instructor there, Mr. Bentley, he taught French journalism, and he was in charge of the yearbook. But this man, he was an incredible man. He was very character, to say the least. But he understood. He was a teacher, true and true. He understood how to teach young people, and before he was a teacher, he was a priest. So he taught us a lot about values and life, and just, the things like that really shaped me as a young person. But what I didn't realize at the time was that eventually it would end, because I was in a high school club. And at the time, you don't think about it. Once I graduated high school, I couldn't train at my dojo anymore because it's a high school club. And so that was kind of my dilemma, that I wanted to continue with my sensei, but I couldn't go to the high school because it's a high school activities. He actually suggested, to go to NMSU because they had a club there. And so I was excited to meet that sensei and kind of continue my journey. And when I showed up to NMSU the first day, there was about 40 to 50 people on the mat, multiple colored belts, and this black belt. And when I showed up, the black belt came up to me and he said, "Are you Mr. Bentley's student? One of his black belts." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Great. This is the class. It's all yours. I'll see you later." And yeah, and he left. So here I am at 18 years old, maybe. I have never formally instructed. I was a black belt and I knew judo, but I had never instructed. And so here's these 40, 50, college people, that are working towards their professional career, looking at me and as the leader and as a black belt, expecting a lesson and guidance where I wasn't prepared for it. But I'm one of those individuals that, if you put me in a challenge, I'm gonna move forward with it. But with that experience, again, because I'm a curious individual, and it really put me in the spotlight. I went back to Mr. Bentley and I told him, "Hey, this class that you sent me to learn, the instructor left. What do you want me to do?"
Mhm,
And he looked at me kind of like, "What do you
mhm,
mean teach the class?" And at the time,
mhm,
I wasn't confident in my teaching ability. And I told Mr. Bentley, like, I'm not sure I can do it. And he genuinely sat me down and
mhm,
said, "Look, you've been trained very well. There's other black belts that will be there with you that can help you. You just need to just focus on what you want to do. Do you want to be the instructor, or, would you prefer, just to kind of be the student?" And I kind of sat back and I thought about it. And even though I still was kind of shy and reserved at the time, I kind of liked being in the front of the class. And so it was a different environment, just because in high school and when I was a student, high school, and you have fun, and it's a after school activity, and it's something to do. Whereas in college, a lot of the students there were genuinely pursuing degrees in some sort of sports education, physical therapy, medical field, and things like that. So those people were serious about their training. So I had to really take it serious as far as what I was going to instruct. And so I was able to actually develop myself as an instructor and develop a good program through NMSU. And we were successful through many years, developing a variety of, successful competitors, successful instructors too, and variety of black belts. So it was definitely an experience.
Wow, so did you ever think that that's where life was gonna take you? Like, here I am, I'm in high school, I'm in band, all of a sudden I'm doing judo, and then I graduate, I want to do it more, and then I'm gonna go off to college. You have to tell us what you were studying at the time, whatever happened with that. But then I'm gonna go learn some more judo, and then all of a sudden you're teaching a class, and then like Was that at all what you were expecting? And then after that, kind of like what happened? You start teaching and do you fall in love with it right away? And then what happens after college? You know, yeah, like just kind of walk us through that. I feel like you didn't really seek out martial arts. Martial arts just kind of like came to you and then it just kind of like took over because when I met you, you were definitely more of the softer spoken instructors, which is different because my instructor does a lot of yelling. I think it's the military in him. I welcome it. I like it. I like it. I like it. But you were definitely a more softer spoken instructor. And I think it's very interesting because judo and jujitsu, for me, from an outsider just looking in, it's a very hard martial art. And I think what it means, it's like the gentle way. And I'm like, that is not the gentle way. That is a very hard way. That is being flipped, tossed, thrown. Like, that is not gentle. But it's the gentle way, and you're a very soft-spoken man, and, I was very curious about that, and I was just like, "How did this guy become a sensei, an instructor?" So what happens during college? Did you pursue what you were studying and go into that at all, or were you like, "Nope, this is it. I'm just gonna do martial arts my whole life." Like, what happened?
No, during my later years in high school and early years in college, I didn't really have direction, and I didn't really have a lot of guidance from people other than my sensei and Mr. Bentley again. And I think I kind of a little bit take after him because he was very soft spoken and he was a very gentle soul. I really picked up a lot of things from him and just the way he taught us. But during the time at NMSU, I realized, very quickly that that college is not really my thing. So what ended up happening actually, and again, just kind of falling into things most of the time, is I was actually working just part time with my mother at a produce facility where they process produce and other things, and I was just trying to make a little money helping out and things like that. At the time, the owner of the facility said, "Hey, we need basically a gopher to clean up job sites and things like that," and I figured, yeah, what could it hurt? Making a little extra money, and I ended up working with a contractor, and just basically getting coffee and cleaning stuff up. And it was really odd how it happened that the people he had working for, they were doing an okay job, but for whatever reason, the contractor noticed that anytime they would give me anything to do, I would do it right away, and it was very detailed. Like even just the simple thing like getting coffee or whatever, it was done right away. It was done correct. So he said, "Hey, do you want to learn to put in these electrical outlets and electrical switches in these houses?" And I was like, sure, why not? And I think within the year, I actually had my electrician's license. So it went from, graduating high school to starting college to, "Well, this is not really for me," to becoming an electrician. I was still actually going to NMSU with the club. So I was actually helping the club as far as being the instructor, but the club itself was a student run club. And the students there were doing a great job as far as running it through NMSU and organizing it, making sure they're securing funding for the tournaments that they wanted to do. So I was just kind of an advisor at that time, and I was still the sensei because none of the students had their black belts yet. So I was actually working towards that end of seeing if we could make it possible for one of them to get their black belt. So it kind of went from I was going to MSU to become a student to becoming the teacher of the judo club, and then I started kind of working as an electrician, and then again just these weird turns in life. We were actually practice in the room where we used to practice judo. The doors in the back of the room used to open to the outside soccer fields at NMSU, and we were practicing in the summer, and it's hot, so we would open those doors, and there was some gentlemen outside practicing kung fu, and they saw us doing judo, and they said, "Hey, do you guys do grappling, and we said yes. And they had all these weird questions about grappling, and they actually told me, hey, our sensei just recently started doing some sort of grappling, and he keeps tapping us out, and we can't figure it out. Will you help us? And that's actually how I got started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The kung fu guys, their sensei was actually learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in California from the Gracie family, and he was bringing it back to the kung fu students and kind of tapping them out and bullying them a little bit, and just because it was a new thing. The UFC had just come out in 1993, and this was in 1996. So everybody was looking for these grappling arts like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but it wasn't very prevalent at the time. So right around that time, like I said, I was in transition from, really teaching a lot of judo to starting to learn Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and then eventually, becoming an electrician and just kind of pursuing that for a while. And learning from these general contractors. And I think these were like, man's men, like they were very rough and tumble. And I learned a lot from that just because, like I said, I was very reserved and quiet at the time. And these guys were very big personalities. And, I enjoyed the time because it was very different for me because my father was very quiet, whereas these gentlemen were very loud and boisterous, and they were very animated. So it was something new to me, but I think it brought out something in me just to see those types of personalities. So it was a very interesting time.
Wow, Oscar, I feel like I have more questions now than I did before because I well, I'm trying to gather my thoughts and really figure out like what I want to ask next. But when did you just realize that you were gonna do this for the rest of your life? Because I say that because I've been doing martial arts since I was 4 years old. I grew up with it. I come from a family of martial artists. When I'm stressed, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, like all I want to do is martial arts. Like I don't ever think I'll stop. I think right now I'm looking for like how can I get into a gym? Maybe you can give me advice here. Just tell me like this is how. But I don't really have the finances to just go and be like, "Hi, like I'm Val and I've been doing martial arts forever and I just want to come train. Can I come train here?" I also don't have a lot of money right now. So I definitely need to go somewhere because it is like a need. Like it's not like I want to. It's like I feel like my body needs it, my spirit needs it. I it's something that I just wanna do for the rest of my life. So when did you just decide, like, "No, this is what I wanna do, like, this is my calling." Did you feel like that was your calling? Did you feel like, "This is what I'm here to do in this lifetime, in this earth, like, I'm here to teach and keep learning?" Did you ever battle between being an electrician and having the safety? That's the other thing, it's like the safety of, like, this is a job, and this job gives me money, and like I gotta do the thing that gives me money because I need money to live, to buy food, to exist, or the route of like, this is martial arts and this is what I love, and people come to me and they want me to teach them. Did you ever struggle between the two of like the need of security and the like, I don't want to say the passion, the thing that you actually enjoy doing? Or maybe you enjoyed it being an electrician. Like maybe you're like, actually, I really like this, so maybe I should do both. Was there ever a point where you're like, this is the one that I'm gonna do? Or and this is gonna what I'm gonna do on the side, or I'm just gonna go do this full time? Like, was there ever a power struggle between the 2?
Definitely. And again, just it's weird how these little transitions in life happen because I did enjoy my time as an electrician. I enjoyed the work. It was great, and I enjoyed the people around me. And like I said, I had some very great characters and individuals. You get to move around in that field too. Like you're always at a different job site. You're all over town and different places. It was an awesome time. But what ended up happening to me was that I got hurt on the job, and it was an accident, and I got hurt, and I was down to where I needed surgery, and I knew I was going to be down for a bit, and of course, anytime you're injured, you worry, am I going to be able to work? Am I going to be able to pay my bills and things like that? So when I got hurt and I had surgery, to repair my injuries and whatnot, I got a phone call from my employer at the time, and he said, "Hey, we need you here on Monday, because you have to put in hours or else we can't keep you employed." And so I told him, I just had surgery. I cannot, I'm like bedridden. I can't be there on Monday. And so he said, well, then we can't keep you on. And so I was pretty mad about that because I had been with that company for many years, and I was one of their top guys. I always showed up on time. I was never late, never missed work. And I felt like they were trying to push me out. And so I was kind of aggravated about that, to the point where, I wanted to call him and just kind of be like, "Hey, man, I don't appreciate that," or anything like that. And I was to that point where, sometimes when things happen to you, and you stew and you kind of get upset. And so I'm bedridden at the time, and I turned the TV on, and because I was trying to calm down and just kind of process my emotions. And on the television, there's a building on fire, and huge skyscraper. And I was confused. I was like, what is going on? And on the news, on every channel, is this building. And I was like, what is happening? Like, what is the big deal? Building fire. And still trying to process my emotions. And then I hear the man on the news saying that a second building got hit. And I was like, what is going on? Well, that was when the 9/11, the terrorist attack happened. The first tower had just been hit, which is what I was watching. And then the second tower got hit. So me, going from being aggravated from my job to seeing this tragedy, and I was in shock of what had just happened with the terrorist attack. And so, I kind of forgot about the whole losing my job thing to seeing this. And again, just this weird string of events, to where right after that, a friend of mine called and said, "Hey, did you see the thing on the news?" I was like, "Yeah, it's crazy what's going on with the 9/11 attack, with the terrorist attack." So she starts telling me, "How are you doing? Do you need anything? I know you're just in bed." And so I started telling her, I'm really worried about being able to pay my bills, and now I don't have a job. And she said, this lady came by my work and said that they're hiring. And I said, "Oh yeah, what kind of job is it?" And she said, she works at a dental office. And I looked at her and I said, office work that's not my thing. I'm an electrician. I wouldn't even know what to do in an office. And she said, she's just looking for somebody who's bilingual, and just, it's an entry level position. What are you doing right now? You're not gonna be able to do any type of physical work. Maybe an office job would be better." And so I kind of smiled and laughed, and I said, "I don't know how to use a computer. I'm not familiar with any type of software. I can't sit still in an office. It's not for me." And so some days went by, and bills start rolling in, and start getting a little nervous. And I finally broke down, and I called the lady and said, "Hey, I heard you're hiring." And this lady was just very energetic. And she said, "Can you come over right now? Like, come down to the office." And so I went and showed up to her office, and, typical job interview. "What's your work experience in dental?" "None." "Can you use this software? Do you know how to use a computer?" "No." "Do you have this? Do you have that?" "No, no." "Can you speak Spanish?" "Yes." "Great, you're hired." So I get hired in a job that I am not qualified for. But again, just, I'm not one to back down from a challenge. So I show up on Monday morning to this dental office, and it's buzzing. People are going, and I kind of stand in the corner for about 45 minutes, because nobody's really talking to me, and they're going. And I finally asked a young lady there, I was like, "Hey, what do you want me to be doing right now?" And she kind of gave me this face like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "It's my first day. What do you want me to do?" And she's looked at me weird and said, "I don't know. You're the office manager. You're supposed to tell us what to do." And so I called the lady that hired me, and I was like, "Hey, these people are telling me that I'm the manager." And she's like, "Yeah, you're the manager." And so I was a little confused, and I was like, "I don't know what I should be doing." But again, like, being one of those people that doesn't back down from a challenge, I kind of figured out what to do, and really leaned into that job in the dental office. Long story short, what ended up happening is I ended up building up that dental office, helping them open a second one, and really thriving in the dental field. So I went from being an electrician and being out and about everywhere, all over town, to this office job. But during that time, I was still training martial arts. So I ended up advancing in my black belts in judo, and really, we were putting on tournaments at MSU. We were traveling all over the place. Me and my team, we ended up winning the state championship. One of my teammates actually ended up and in the world championships, to where he was actually ranked number 3 in the world at the time. So I kind of supported him, and being his main training partner. So all during that time, I was still involved in martial arts, but I didn't know. really where it was going. I loved it, and being involved with this new job in the dental field, I really loved that too. It was neat, and I wasn't doing the dental work. I was actually doing the administrative side of it. So through that, I actually found, and I didn't know this about myself because I was such a horrible student in school, but I found that the accounting and the insurance side of it really, it spoke to my brain, and I was really good at it, the numbers end of it. And through that experience, I found out too that a lot of people don't like doing the accounting work, dealing with taxes, dealing with insurance companies. They just hated it. And I loved it. It was, one of the things that I looked at it is I looked at myself as an advocate because a lot of the insurance companies that I was dealing with were like the Medicaid, Medicare programs. So I was helping a lot of senior citizens get their stuff paid for. So I really like that because a lot of our seniors were having a hard time getting dental work, getting healthcare coverage. Oh, they're older, they don't have a lot of money. So I looked at it that way to where how can I help these people? And really just I used to take a lot of joy calling these insurance companies because they after a while they got to know me and I would call and they're like, oh God, it's this guy again. Like, because they knew I wasn't going to give up on getting these claims settled, on getting this dental work approved or paid for. So at that time, a good friend of mine opened a martial arts school, and he said, "Hey, I know you're free in the evenings. We have these three other instructors, and we're going to collaborate on opening a martial arts school that doesn't focus on just one martial art. We're just going to have like a variety of martial arts, but we want some really qualified instructors." So I thought about it, and I had been on and off at NMSU, and I agreed to instruct a judo program, and so we did. The dojo opened, and so we had judo, taekwondo, hapkido, and some cardio kickboxing. It was a great time. At the time, the hapkido instructor was actually he had done judo in his youth, and he was an older man at the time. He, in fact, you probably know Master Fritz. He's passed away now, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm.
so I got to work alongside with him, and Master Fritz really mentored me as far as being a better instructor and having a better understanding of martial arts. And we had a lot of conversations about, grappling arts and things like that. So during my time at that dojo is when I really started kind of figuring out that maybe I should, be an instructor and really kind of focus on that. And so during our time there, one of the students came up and he said, "Hey, there's this event coming up and I want to do it, but I don't know if we're training correctly or I don't know how to train for this." And so I assumed he wanted to go to a judo tournament, maybe taekwondo tournament. I don't know because we were doing both. And he said, there's this thing where they're doing he said NHB. And I was like, what is NHB? And he says, it's no holds barred. And I was like, what? And so I was like, so are you talking like a tough man competition? And he goes, no, this is like anything goes fight. Like you can punch, kick, you can grapple, and it's in a cage. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, like the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the thing that was on TV, because at the time the UFC still hadn't gained a lot of momentum, so the UFC would have an event like once a year maybe, and it wasn't very prevalent. If you knew about it, it was by chance. So I was trying to figure out what this was, and I told the student like no. I was like, you know what, you're gonna get hurt. This sounds shady. Are you even training? What would they do? Anything goes. Like, can you punch somebody in the throat? Can you hit somebody in the groin? What's the rules? He said, no, it's just like martial arts style against martial arts style. So I kind of kept telling him no, and he kind of pushed and was persistent about it. So I finally looked at it and I talked to a couple of the other instructors, and he said, well, let's see. So we kind of started training and looking into it, and talked to the event promoter and asked them about the rule set and things like that. And so we finally said, okay, let. We ended up at a NHB or basically a mixed martial arts event, no holds barred at a bar here locally, and they had set up the cage on their patio, and my student went out there, and he was fighting against a very tough individual. He looked very very tough in shape, and the fight started, and the my student's opponent kind of just came out swinging and very aggressive, and my student took him down to the ground really quick. So at the time, what people didn't understand is that even though my student was on the bottom, he was winning because he was kind of setting up his submission. But the crowd and even the opponent's corner, when the other gentleman took my student down, they were like, "Yeah, he's winning. He's got him. He's on top. He's throwing all these punches. He's got him." And so I knew what was happening, but everybody else was like, "Wow, like this kid just ran over this other kid, and now they're on the ground. He's about to lose." Well, my student ends up locking the other kid in a triangle choke as the opponent is swinging and flailing around. He goes out, and my student stands up. The other guy's knocked out. He's unconscious from the choke, and everybody's confused. And they're like, "What just happened? Like this kid got taken down and was getting punched, and now the other guy's out." It baffled everybody. And so that particular event, now all of a sudden, everybody wants to train with us because they don't understand what happened, but they want to know what happened. And so the week after that event, we had all kinds of individuals showing up wanting to do NHB. And we told them we don't have that type of class here. We train Taekwondo, Hapkido, Judo, or cardio kickboxing. And they're like, "No, we want to do what your student did." And so the owner of that school said, "Hey, why don't you just start a program?" And I was like, "I wouldn't even know where to start." And he said, "Well, you already have one student. He already fought. He was successful. Just teach them grappling and kind of go from there." And so that was actually the beginning of our mixed martial arts program. There was no at the time there was no formal curriculum. There was no formal gyms or classes. We started it, and there was some programs and teams around the country, but nothing formal in Las Cruces, even though there was little clubs and things doing that kind of stuff. So we started a formal class and just kind of tried to figure it out from there. So it was very interesting. But I think those two events with meeting Master Fritz and then this mixed martial arts things really pushed me towards being a coach and an instructor, and then eventually a mentor to a lot of these fighters and a lot of these young people that eventually actually became black belts and instructors themselves.
Right. So when I talk about Las Cruces and New Mexico and just the Southwest, I genuinely think that there is a lot of martial artist talent, a lot of either from students or just coaches. There's just so much talent. And I think we are, I don't want to say finally starting to see it, but we are starting to produce a lot of fighters, especially as we just saw last weekend with Stephanie Khan from El Paso and Holly Holm from Albuquerque. Similarly, I think there was just a wrestling champion that came out of Las Cruces very
Yeah.
recently. So there is a lot of talent in the Southwest. So what can you tell us about that talent? Because I don't think a lot of people know that from our region. And then also, if you can open up about where Legacy comes from and how you founded Legacy and what you were working on there.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. We have so much talent, so many good martial arts athletes here. I think back when I was younger and I was starting out, we had a lot of talent, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity. Especially in MMA, it was still young, it was new. So if you wanted to have success in MMA, you had to go to the East Coast or the West Coast because that's where you were California or you were either like in Florida or in New York. And a lot of the fighters here, didn't have the resources to do that. And even though were starting a program, our program was still very young to where we were not at that level. But, I was fortunate enough to be able to train some individuals that eventually got to that level that got to the UFC. I had three of my students make it all the way up to the very top to the UFC. And, I was very proud of that. But at the same time, because I used to think like, yeah, I did that, and really I didn't do that. They did that. I think I fanned the fire that they had within them because they even though they started training with me, they took it to that next level, and so they sought out resources and things to take them to that level because we honestly didn't have it here. And so that's kind of how Legacy had come about and continues to grow because I want to make sure that we can provide a program so that we can get students to that level. But as far as Legacy goes, it's an interesting story just because one of my MMA fighters approached me one day because we were primarily just training adults. We weren't training children. But he said that his cousin. He's a youngster. I think he was 8 or 9. He said he really wants to do some sort of grappling art. He wanted him to do jujitsu, and at the time we weren't really doing too much of anything. He said, "Hey, there's an opportunity at this dojo to start this class. They have a little time slot. Do you want to teach it?" And I said, I don't know. Let me think about it because I'm teaching these MMA fighters over here. Let me see what my time looks like because I'm not sure. And during that time, my daughter was with me, and she's like, "Well, Dad, I can do it. If you don't have the time, I can do it as long as you're there to guide me and whatnot. I'll teach the little kids." And so I said, let me think about it. And so we decided to move forward with it. And so Christina kind of started her kids judo program, and she did a really good job. She really blossomed as an instructor at that time, and was really enjoying it. So I remember it was a Saturday, and we were sitting around the house, and Christina came home, and she was kind of upset and crying. And I was like, what's the matter with you? And she was just like, well, I just had a bad day, and I'm not sure what to do. And I was like, well, tell me about it. What's going on? And she said that she had a hard time in judo class. So me, being her dad, I was like, kids are challenging to teach. I understand your frustration, and you just have to, figure out how they learn and kind of keep the class fun. And she kind of got quiet, and she was like, Dad, it's not the kids. The kids are awesome. She said, every time that I'm teaching, the other instructors there are making fun of me. And I was like, what? And said, some of the other black belts are giving me a hard time. And I was like, hard time how? And so she kind of explained the situation, and it sounded to me like they were trying to bully her a little bit because she was at the time like 16 or 17 at the time maybe, and she felt bullied and whatnot. So I'm a very emotional person, so I reacted as most dads would. I got in the car and I was ready to knock some heads into the wall. And I was driving over to where she would teach class and to kind of let these black belts know that you don't do that to my daughter. And I was pretty emotional about it, and I was going to let them have it. And on my drive there, I thought about something because Christina, the kids that she had in her judo class were awesome, and she really took a lot of pride in that class. And then, of course, there was other children at the dojo, other students. And so, in my rage and in full dad mode, over there, I was thinking, what is this going to look like when I get to this dojo if I beat these guys up, or if I get beat up, or if an altercation happens, what kind of example are we going to be showing these kids and these students? And so I showed up to the dojo, and I kind of collected myself, and I walked in and I said, look, my daughter said this happened. I don't know because I wasn't here, but I'm going to tell you like this. I'm not going to have my daughter bullied, and she will no longer be teaching here. And we left. And once we left, I came back home. And of course, my daughter was fully expecting, like, who did you beat up? Are you going to get arrested? What's going to happen? And so I just told her, you know what, I let them know that you're not going to be teaching there anymore. We'll figure it out. And, some weeks went by, and my daughter is kind of going stir crazy because she's used to training. And she's like, Dad, we need to find another dojo. And it's like, I wouldn't even know where to start. We'll figure it out. And she's like, well, why don't we just open our own dojo? And I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm not trying to run a business. I don't want to run a dojo. I would prefer just to work at someone's dojo. And she's like, Dad, you're not going to find a place, or we're not going to find a place that's going to fit what we have envisioned for what we want to do. We're better off opening a dojo. And she was very persistent about this. I told her I was trying to find an out because I didn't want to do it. And so I told her, look, we have limited funds, but if you can find a space, I'll consider it. And honestly, I told her that because I knew there was no space for grappling. You need a lot of wide open space. I knew in my head, I knew she wasn't going to find it. And yeah, it took her less than 24 hours. The very next day, she's like, Dad, there's a suite that opened up here right next to the house. I was like, what are you talking about? So our little local grocery store was in a small suite. They were having success in their business, and they outgrew their spot. So they were actually moving into a bigger spot. So their suite was open. And Christina had found out, because they were at the grocery store, and they were like, hey, this spot is open. So, she was excited, and I was like, oh my God, she found a spot. So we went over there and looked at it. It was tiny. I think it was like 1,500 square feet. It was small. And I looked at it, and I told her, look, if the rent is if we can afford it, we'll go for it. And so we talked to the landlord. He actually gave us an incredible deal, and just affordable rent with, some months for free to get started and things like that. And the location was awesome because it was literally down the street from our house. It was like 5 minutes from the house. um we had our little doubts because it was kind of out of on the edge of Las Cruces, so we were thinking, are people going to come out, they want to drive all the way out here. But what we noticed is that all the other businesses out there in this little plaza, they had a lot of foot traffic. There was a pizza place, there's a grocery store, there's a dollar store, so there was a lot of people coming, not just from the immediate area, but people were driving, especially from to this grocery store. So we said, let's move forward. So we ordered mats, and we got started. So we didn't know what we were going to call it. We didn't know what we were going to do. And Christina and my wife Michelle and I were sitting around, and what are we going to call the dojo? And my wife suggested some names, I suggested some names, and it didn't fit. And we were going back and forth, and it got to the point where we were getting on each other's nerves, to where like, this is right, no, that's not right. And so we kind of stepped away from it. And Christina and my family, we were sitting around, and Christina was like, well, what do you envision? What is the goal? What are we trying to do? And I told her, I just want to honor Mr. Bentley's legacy and his memory. And when I said that, Christina said, that's what we should call it. We should call it legacy, to honor the legacy of all these black belts and these mentors and these instructors that you've been around. And so we kind of agreed, the three of us, and said, that's a great idea. And yeah, and that's how it took off. And so we started Legacy Mixed Martial Arts, and my motivation was I wanted to start it, not to, I didn't have any, I didn't imagine we would grow like we did. My whole thing is I just wanted a place to be able to train with my daughter. We were working towards some goals for her, and we needed a space. We couldn't train at home. We needed a place outside of our home. So I was like, if anything, we'll gain some students so I can train my daughter, to be a solid black belt, and it'll be fun. And yeah, it seemed like overnight, it started growing, and of course we did face some challenges, but we were growing exponentially. And it started to be fun, and then I started to realize, that instructing and doing this dojo was actually something that I may want to consider as a career, and kind of move forward with it, because I was still working at the dental office and really thriving there. But once we got Legacy started and really having our own business, it really clicked for me, and I realized, like, okay, this is something that I may want to do, seriously.
Mhm. Wow, that's really, really powerful. I'm really happy that you made that jump, and that I think unfortunately I'm not happy that that happened to Christina. I know her, we went to high school together. She's a good friend of mine. And I feel like also as an instructor, I've been there, and it sucks when you're working, to be better on yourself. And, when people are laughing at you or critiquing you, it's like, well, you're also not helping. It's like you're not finding a solution, so you're just making it worse. So I'm sad that she had to go through that. But also in that happening, you were able to create something new. So that makes me happy for you guys. And it makes me happy for my state, for my city, because I needed martial arts in my life. And again, I don't think it's necessarily like a want. I think it's something that I needed. It made me the individual that I am. It made me confident. It gave me a voice. It gave me skills. A lot of people would ask me, like, why are you happy all the time? And I'm like, well, because I kick and punch things every day. And like, I just like relieve stress, and I'm always happy. Like that, it made me a very happy go lucky person because I had a place to train and be myself and express myself. So the fact that you were creating that for someone like me makes me happy. So one of my follow-up questions is, what have you learned as a sensei about your students? I think I studied psychology, but I also see people that maybe didn't study psychology being like really good psychologists just because they understand human emotion and human development, and they know, like, they work with humans. So, I feel like you've created a place and a space where people can go train, whether they want to get stronger or where they want to maybe become athletes, and maybe UFC is something that they have for dreams or aspirations, or maybe they just do it because it gives them confidence. So what would you tell maybe your students or people that are scared to go and train, or just anyone that's thinking about martial arts, like what is legacy? What does legacy offer? And why should maybe they consider training? Or what have you learned about being a instructor, more than just your daughter, but just an overall instructor? Like, what can you tell us about that experience?
You know, with my daughter, getting bullied like that, it made me think about me when I was younger because I also got bullied, but it was one of those things that I thought it was just me, like it only happened to me. And now teaching at Legacy, I didn't realize what an epidemic bullying was here in this area because it seemed like almost every child that we got into the dojo was getting bullied, and that's why they were there. But the other thing, especially just with dealing with a wide variety of personalities with these children, like they're so awesome and so unique. A lot of the kids, what I found is that they're trying to fit in with their peers, and they're having a hard time either because they're different, or just they think differently about things. And so a lot of the kids that we were getting in the dojo were kids that they didn't fit the mold. Like they would try the usual sports, they would get put in baseball, soccer, even like dance clubs and things like that, to were just trying to find their thing. And what we found is that martial arts, even though I say it's for everybody, but that's not necessarily true because, you really, it is scary going into some place like that because a lot of people have a misconception of what we do in martial arts, especially kids, because, what they see in martial arts is they see it on TV. So we would get a lot of little ones that would come in crying and be like, I don't want to get beat up. And it's like, well, that's not what we do in here. You're not going to just get thrown in and get beat up the first day. We learn a lot of things. So, when the kids were coming in, we would do a lot of games, martial arts based games. And so they would come in and they were like, oh, I thought we were going to get beat up, but you guys are just like, it's like recess in here. We're playing games. And they would come in and be more comfortable and they would play the games. But then the parents loved it because they would realize, like, yeah, they're playing games, but they're learning to defend themselves. They're learning to be confident in some of their abilities, and it's putting them in a place where they have to they have to come out of their shell, and when you're having fun on the mat and everybody's laughing and smiling, and you're in a safe environment, even kids that are shy will come out of their shell and kind of try different things. So it gave me a lot of joy to see that, as far as when I was teaching, like kids smiling and laughing. But at the same time, when Christina was teaching too, I would watch her, and she was getting a lot of joy out of that. So that made me happy, just because a lot of these kids, again, that didn't fit the mold, were finding their place in the dojo. And then some of those kids that really didn't fit the mold or came in with the attitude of, I don't want to be here. I'm just here because my mom or dad made me. Some of those kids are some of my instructors now. So, it's interesting to see that development.
Okay.
It's interesting to see like some of those kids now, just because I got to see them from the beginning.
Yeah, I think also martial arts, again, if it's not something like, well, I don't want to be a professional athlete, or like, well, I don't want to be an instructor. I think definitely some people it's something that they're gonna do for the rest of their life. I think some people it's something they're gonna do professionally, which I feel like that's something that I wanted to do, especially for Taekwondo, but it's okay, it didn't happen. But it's still part of my life. And some people just become long lifetime practitioners and they just start to learn other martial arts, where I think it's where I'm at now. It's like, okay, I learned this and I mastered this, but man, there's so much more. Like there's Kung Fu, and there's Judo, and there's Jujitsu, there's Krav Maga, and there's Hapkido. Like there's so much to learn. And that's kind of where I'm at now in my life. But also, I think just being a martial artist gives you resilience, and it helps you to push through and not quit. I think that's probably the biggest thing I've learned is martial arts has taught me to not quit, and also just see how capable I am. It's like, oh my gosh, I never thought I could do this. So if I could do this, then I can go do this other thing. It's really put things into perspective that I'm not helpless, that I'm not a victim, that I have so much power, and that I'm very capable. So, Sensei, what are you up to now? So you have legacy. Are you training any new martial arts? Are you like, what do you see for the future of legacy? Like, what does the future hold for you, for legacy, and then just for our community? Like, what? I think this is just beyond opening up a martial arts school and having a business and like making money. But it's like, what does the future hold? Like, what do you really see legacy doing? Because I always think about community. And I also feel like the people that you're inviting into your dojo, those are people that are future doctors, future lawyers, future martial artists. Like, what do you see for the future?
Being in martial arts so long, I think when you become a black belt, I think everyone, and I would guess most everyone will get to a point where you think like, okay, like I'm good, like I've been doing this so long, like I know what I'm doing, and I'm good at what I do, and I think some people sometimes take it too far to where they think like they're like a grandmaster, high level expert. And to me, I got to that point where like, I'm very knowledgeable. I can do this. I know what I'm doing. And then you meet somebody that just shatters that ideal. So I went to a martial arts convention in Las Vegas, and for the most part, the seminars and things that were going on were mostly striking seminars. And so they had two individuals there that were actually, one was doing a judo seminar, one was doing a jiu-jitsu seminar. And the individual doing jiu-jitsu was Carlos Machado. And so with Carlos, he's a legend in not only jiu-jitsu, but in the martial arts world. He's cousins to the Gracies, and he's actually Chuck Norris's sensei as far as jiu-jitsu sensei. And just an absolute legend. He's been around. He's done everything in jiu-jitsu. Just an incredible man. So I was trying to attend this seminar. The other one was the other seminar that was going on with the judo guy. The gentleman, his name is Zoltan. Zoltan. The reason why I wanted to do that is not because of the judo aspect of it. Is Zoltan is the rhythm guitarist for a rock band. He's the guitarist for Five Finger Death Punch. So me being a fan of the music, I wanted to go meet him. And so we went to the seminar with Zoltan first, and there was mostly Taekwondo and karate people there. Me and my goddaughter and a few other individuals were the only judo people there. So he kind of knew this. And so he kind of used us to throw around, and he did an awesome seminar, and we really connected and talked about technique. He actually showed me a lot of things that I didn't know. And so that was a great experience. But when we went on to go do some jujitsu with Carlos, we were on the mat, and he taught an awesome seminar. But at the end, like most clinicians will do, he said, does anyone have any questions? And a young lady in the event said, hey, when I do this technique, I always hurt my wrist, and it's my favorite technique. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can you help me? And so he said, absolutely. He goes, come here. And he said, look, when you do this technique, and he kind of started showing this. Well, it was a strangulation technique. Well, when he got his helper and he started doing the technique, and so when you put a strangulation or choke on anybody, you have to go around their neck. Well, Carlos grabbed the guy from like really low down here around his belly. And when he grabbed his uniform and he grabbed him by the belly like this, he applied the technique and put pressure on the guy's like chest almost. And the guy was like, the helper was really dramatic about it. And he like tapped out and I looked at that like, what just happened? Like that, he grabbed him by the chest. That's not a choke. And so everybody in the room was confused too. And
Mm-hmm,
they were like, can you show it again? And so he did it again, and the helper
mm-hmm,
was like, "Oh my god!" And he tapped out. And so I leaned over to my goddaughter that was with me, and I go, that doesn't. This is a nonsense technique. That wouldn't work. That's not a strangulation. So as I'm making this comment, Carlos said, we're out of time, guys. I got to get off the mat because there's another clinician coming in. But if you guys have questions, come over to my booth.
mm-hmm,
We go over to his booth,
mm-hmm.
and I told my goddaughter, hey, I have my gi. I'm going to throw my gi on, and I'm going to have him do that technique on me because that does not work. This guy's he's showing nonsense. So I went over to Carlos, and I told him, hey, the technique you were doing on the mat here, will you show that to me? Will you do it on me? And he said, absolutely, my friend. Step on the mat. And everybody around kind of went like, ooh, like, and I didn't understand what was happening. And I threw on my gi, and he goes, come here, my friend. Well, as I found out, when he says my friend, when he's like my friend, that means that he's gonna put it on you, like really put it on you. I didn't know this at the time, but the man gets in position and he does the same exact thing. He grabbed me by my uniform, by around the chest right here, and we have a crowd going now, and my goddaughter's actually recording this technique because I told her record it because this will not work. So he's like, my friend, you see, that you grab here, you
Okay.
do this, and he applies pressure. And I remember I was sitting upright as he was doing this, and I blinked. And when I opened my eyes, I was actually staring at the ceiling at the lights. I had gone out, he unconscious. It happened so fast that I could not I could not comprehend what happened. So I came back to my wife, my goddaughter's in shock, like what just happened? And so me, because I need understanding, I was like, sir, can you do it again? And he's like, absolutely, my friend, look. And I was like,
Uh,
oh my God. So he goes and he does it again. And I start going unconscious. So I tap out. I say, thank you. I go over to my goddaughter and I was like, did you record that? And she's like, yes. And I was like, what happened? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know how he did that. So I didn't have an opportunity to have a conversation with him because he had a lot of people trying to talk to him at the time. But I reached out after that seminar and I told him, I told Carlos, I cannot comprehend how you did that. I need to know. And so he
mhm,
invited me
mhm.
to his dojo and to one of his clinics in Dallas, and we ended up, striking a friendship. And I, he made me understand that I didn't know what I thought I knew. And so
Oh, wow.
it really humbled me because I at that point I had been in judo and jiu-jitsu for 20, 25, 27 years at the time. And when we went over to his dojo to his seminar, I grappled with him. Now, Carlos at the time was 60, 64, and he just tapped me out every which way possible. And so I came back home and I talked to my black belts here and I go, look, this is what happened. This was my experience. I talked to Carlos, and I think we need to pursue this. And so these black belts were like, yeah, let's do it. But I told him we're starting at white belt because what he's doing is not what we're doing. It is very different. He has this incredible knowledge. So we're starting with his Brazilian jiu-jitsu system as white belts. Some of these black belts were like, oh, like we know how to grapple. We know our stuff. And so I told him, I realize that, but you'll understand more when you grapple with him. And so some of these black belts were not happy about having to put on a white belt, but I did it and I was leading by example. I stepped on the mat with a white belt on, and Carlos did his thing, and all these other black belts were like, "Oh my God, you're right. Like we need to pursue this." And so right now, of course, we've advanced through some belts now. So I'm currently pursuing my black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu under Carlos Machado. With
Wow.
legacy. We've tried to build a community and kind of a space for everyone to train. So we do have judo, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and mixed martial arts classes for kids, teens, and adults. But I think one of the things too is that we teach the very young kids. We actually have a 3 and 4 year old program that's solid and very. It's a very very good program. So throughout my journey, even though I never thought we would be have our own dojo or be running a dojo, it's become one of those things that it was good for my daughter and me to train, and it really strengthened our bond, but it also expanded our family because then we ended up meeting other people, and then my other family members came to train and they found that they really enjoyed the training. And then of course I have a lot of female family members. So right now, of course, with my daughter, of course, she's always trained with me, but now my grandbaby trains with my daughter, at home, and trains here when she's here with us. And so she grew up in the dojo. My goddaughters train with me, my nieces, my godson, and then one of our cousins. And actually, just recently, I found a cousin that I didn't know I had that just started training with us that we found out we were related. So it's been a family bonding experience, but at the same time, it's been one of those things that we built something that we didn't know we needed because, like you said, the dojo's been one of the, like a stress reliever. It's been one of those things that it's a big part of my life, but at the same time, it's fun to be in there, and a lot of people don't understand that because they look at you like you go to this place and they choke you and they twist your joints, and they're like, yeah, absolutely, like, and that's fun to you. It's like, yeah, it's awesome, and they look at you like you're a maniac. Even with the striking arts, the MMA guys, they sit there and they punch and kick each other as hard as they can, and afterwards they're like, let's go have a meal, let's go hang out. And a lot of people look at that like, you guys are crazy. Like, this guy just like busted your nose, he hit you in the stomach, and you're like buying him lunch. And you're like, yeah, because
Mhm.
I think it's one of those human connection things that, especially with grappling,
Yeah.
we're always touching each other. So I think there's like an exchange of energy, and when you're around people
Yeah.
that are positive and they have that awesome energy, it's contagious, and you have that exchange. But at the same time, when you come in and you're stressed from work, you're stressed from life, and you just get on the mat and just get completely worn out, tired out, and you get it all out, then you go home and you can rest and kind of be at peace. So, that's kind of the thing that
Mm,
I look at for legacy is that how can we support our parents and help them raise their kids with their values and kind of support them, but also how can we help our adults because adults sometimes suffer in silence. They're trying to be the leader of their home, the parent, the mentor, the spouse, a good family member. So they are making sure that their kids are growing up right, but then they're not taking care of themselves. So we're trying to build a couple of things at Legacy to kind of let adults know that yeah, this is fun for your kids, and yes, they'll learn self defense and confidence and all the usual stuff. But what about you? How can we help you relieve
yeah,
stress? How can we help you get that anxiety out? How
yeah,
can we help you be more confident, in your job and your home life and all that. So we have a couple of things coming out this year that is going to help with that stuff. So it's something that I've put a lot of thought into with a variety of other instructors, and we just want to build good opportunities not only for our families but also with the fighters because looking at like we were talking about earlier with Stephanie Hahn, the little boy Colby Gonzalez is a wrestler and an awesome jiu-jitsu kid. All these they've had to seek out opportunities elsewhere to thrive. And I think if, here in the martial arts community here in Las Cruces, if we can work together towards, really creating those opportunities here where they don't have to go anywhere, that would be an ideal situation. But, it's easier said than done because, like most martial artists, especially black belts, we have big personalities, sometimes, a little bit of ego, which, you have to have a little bit of ego, a little bit of, a lot of charisma, a lot of, personality. So sometimes, we butt heads and sometimes personalities don't mesh. But I think, with the martial arts community here, we have so much talent in both the striking and the grappling that we can actually, we can learn to work together. We can really create a good opportunity for our future athletes, but also create a community of like legitimate martial artists, not just people that are teaching what's popular now, like legitimate people who have made put in the time to, to go through an art, and get certified as an instructor to really get earn their black belt to become an expert in their field. And we have quite a few here in Las Cruces, and it's surprising, when you really look at it, because some of our martial arts experts and community leaders have martial arts schools. Some of them don't, some of them are just they practice on their own time and they're really just private about their training, but they are experts, in their field. So, I hope, that hopefully we can get together with all these experts and create something good in the future.
yeah. I completely agree with you. I want to see that for my hometown. I want to see that for my friends. I want to see that for you, for Christina, for my instructor. I really do want to see that for you guys. And I hopefully be a part of that one day. When I was growing up, there weren't a lot of female instructors. I can think back to like my martial arts career. I only had one martial arts female instructor, and that was Marcy Schober, which I think she's an inspiration. She's written books. She's an advocate for women and self-defense. I only had one female martial arts instructor. So the fact that I got to be a martial arts instructor, that Christina got to be a martial arts instructor, I feel like they're already changing like I don't want to say the narrative, but of like, you know, just what's expected. I guess like you're already having a lot of like female leadership, even like in your school. And then also growing up, there most of the fighters were males, and it wasn't until like Ronda Rousey kind of like made a way for like females and like drew attention to female fighters. But now we have Holly Holm, Stephen Hahn, and it's just like there's again so much talent. So I'm just really happy that you're planting these roots, and I really can't wait to see what happens in a year or 2 years or five. And whenever I am back in New Mexico, I really can't wait to just immerse myself back in the community, back into my sport and my discipline, but also see what I can learn from you and hopefully, just build those paths and like train with you. And I mean, I don't know when that'll happen because I'm still in Washington, but when it happens, you'll know. I do have two more questions. My last question for you, two last questions would be, what would you tell to your younger self? If you could tell to yourself when you're 14 years old and you're in high school and you're like, yep, so you're going to go to this, club and, you don't know it, but you're going to have a dojo one day. Like, would your younger self believe it? What would you tell your younger self first and foremost? And then the last message would be to the audience. So to like any parent that's listening, any student that's listening, to your community, like what would you leave the audience with?
With if I could speak to my younger self, I would really, really try to push myself into taking more opportunities because when I was young, I had a lot of opportunities to train with a lot of incredible martial artists, and I didn't take the ones that I should have. And I feel like if I would have trained with all these other martial artists when I had the opportunity, I think I would have been further along and really had a better understanding of my martial arts. Eventually I got there, but I kind of took the hard road on it. Whereas when I had these opportunities as a youngster, I looked at it like, well, I can't do that because I'm just me. Who am I? When I didn't understand at the time that these masters at the time that I had the opportunity to train with, they were just people too. We all looked at them as these great legendary masters when they were just an individual where anyone could have trained with them, and they were grateful to train with anybody, and everyone. And I just took it as like, who am I? And I didn't take some of these opportunities. Some of them I did, and they were great experiences, and I'm thankful for. But I think if I would really push that on my younger self of, hey, don't be scared of going out of town and training with this person or that person or showing up to this club or that club. But as far as now currently, especially with parents or adults or individuals watching this, I would really tell people, if you have an opportunity to do something, just do it. Don't second guess yourself. Don't overthink about it, because I think that's kind of one of the problems is you weigh the consequences, right? I want to start this new job, but what if? I want to try this new hobby, but what if? You know, I think more than half the time, if you just do it, you'll have success. We started Legacy, and it was just like, what if? And but we jumped, we took that leap of faith, and we've had some great success. This year, 2026 is actually going to be our 10-year anniversary, which it just blows my mind that we've been open for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in October. Because at the time we were like, what if? What if we fail? What if we go into debt? What if we get hurt? And if if you're always weighing those what ifs, you'll never do anything. So you sometimes you just gotta take that leap of faith.
Wow, that's beautiful. I think that's a really good way to close this out. You'll never know unless you take that leap of faith. And I think I can apply that to so many areas in my life. Right now, I think you're currently seeing it. Like I started a podcast mostly because I wanted to have these deep conversations and because it's what makes me happy. I like talking to people. I like learning about people. I studied psychology and I'm not using it in the way like in a clinic. I'm not some like doctor or clinician, but this is a way that I can use and exercise my degree and also talk to people that mean a lot to me or people that I look up to. So thank you for making that happen. And yeah, I think sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith. Wow, that is such a powerful way to end this. Sensei, where can they find you? Social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Las Cruces. Like, how can we look for you? How can we find you? Where are you at?
So right now we are at 3291 Delray Boulevard. We're right next to Ashley Furniture out there in Las Cruces. And then we actually just started a second dojo on El Paseo. And so that one is actually a work in progress where I had an opportunity to work with.
All right, Sensei Oscar, we are about to wrap this up, but you were telling us a little bit about the future of Legacy and what you're building next just before we leave. You were telling us about your two locations, one being in Del Rey and one being in El Paseo.
Yeah, we had an awesome opportunity to work with a karate instructor to help her build her dojo. So the dojo in El Paseo is actually called Phoenix Rising, and they're primarily teaching Kempo karate. But we do have a judo program with one of my black belts there, and of course we have Legacy up on Delray Boulevard. We're doing judo, jiu-jitsu, and MMA over there. So it's keeping us busy, and of course we're on social media. At Legacy MMA 575.com. So you can find us there.
Okay, perfect. If you were thinking about starting martial arts, I think that they are definitely a good dojo and home for a lot of individuals. I don't think that there is a perfect age to start, whether you're young or older or just, looking to start something new, kind of like Sensei Oscar said, just, it's a leap of faith. So, with that said, Sensei, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for helping me out and helping me take that leap of faith and continue what I love doing. Um, Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me on. We really appreciate it and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Sensei.